This episode is sponsored by Simply Earth Essential Oils.
I use essential oils when I do hot yoga because the smell, it gets me in my zen.
I love to use essential oils in my humidifier, especially during these dry winter months.
Aromatherapy, it just creates positive vibes, you know? All of Simply Earth's essential oil recipes are tried and tested by in-house certified aromatherapists.
Simply Earth's essential oils are 100% pure and come from the best farms all over the world. They are also GC and MS tested by a third party to ensure purity. As an added bonus, Simply Earth gives 13% of their profits to help end human trafficking. So not only will your house smell amazing, you'll also be helping to reduce human trafficking.
The essential oils alone would cost over $100 from other companies, but with the Simply Earth Essential Oil Recipe Box, you get 4 pure oils, 6 recipes, and extra ingredients for only $39. And when you subscribe, you get a free big bonus box with even more natural goodies.
As well as a free $20 gift card for subscribing using our code, simplyearth.com/FDS. That's simplyearth.com/FDS. Hey queens, are you ready to level up? Then join our Patreon at patreon.com/the female dating strategy, where you can find weekly bonus content and FDS commentary on all the latest pop culture, relationship, and dating news. If you just want to listen to the extra bonus content, we have the Lurker Mode tier on our Patreon. If you want merchandise, access to the private FDS Patreon Discord, which also includes a monthly book club with FDS and feminist-themed books, as well as FDS merchandise, t-shirts, mugs, and the opportunity to discuss topics with the FDS podcast queens live, as well as submit stories for our Rose Disco Queen and Gnosis discussions on the podcast itself. So if you'd like access to all this and more, visit our Patreon at patreon.com/the female dating strategy. What's up, queens? Welcome to the Female Dating Strategy Podcast, the meanest female-only podcast on the internet. I'm your host, Reaux.
And I'm Savannah.
And I'm Lilith.
And this week, we will be discussing the complex topic of racial fetishization in dating. So we'll be going over what it looks like, what it means to be racially fetishized, how it can manifest when you are dating, and some tips to avoid or some tips to spot when you are being racially fetishized. This is quite, in my opinion, a very, very under-discussed aspect of general dating advice. And it's not really surprising given the fact that most of the most popular dating coaches are often white. So this experience isn't really spoken about as much as it should be. So let's just begin with definitions. So being fetishized is, in its most academic definition, it means sexual fascination with a part of someone's identity, which is not inherently sexual, such as race.
Yeah, I feel like people who are racial fetishizers always frame it as like appreciation, right? So,
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
This is kind of the sticky topic because if you like someone, where's the line, right? Because if you like someone who's of a different culture, often you'll want to express your appreciation or desire to integrate your life with theirs by expressing some kind of appreciation for their culture. But the question is always like, when does it go too far? When does it go from genuine admiration or appreciation for the individual that you're dating? And when does it go to like some weird, creepy colonizer fantasy thing?
Ro's right. It can be very difficult to know where the line is. And it is a very, very insidious form of racism because it assumes at its core that somebody of a particular race will behave in a certain way. And those particular assumptions are what make you want to date that person as opposed to who that individual actually is. So that's where I would draw the line.
I guess if they start to ascribe behaviors to an entire group, specifically submissive behaviors to an entire group,
yes,
that's when it starts to get weird, more so than, because that's more of a motivation of I feel that I should have power over this group of people or more desirability to this group of people based on my race even, right? So they're also like they're giving a premium on their race rather than on this person as an individual, because people are individuals at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
And even if there's like general cultural trends, it doesn't doesn't really say much about the person you're dating in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And people sometimes assume that people are assuming that women of color are always submissive, but it can also go the other way. In my own experience, like Black women, can sometimes be seen as, rough and, super ghetto or really, really, abrasive and brash. Like that's also another stereotype as well, which does exist and which I've personally been confronted with sometimes. I actually had like a guy say to me, like, you don't act Black. And I was like, what the fuck do you mean? And he was like, oh, you're not loud. And I'm like, what? So yeah, that's just an example of how it can go the other way.
Yeah, cringe.
And I'd also like to add, it's not just white men who can perpetuate this as well. It can also be any sort of man, especially if you come from a different background or if you're a different skin tone to them. Yeah, it isn't like just like an issue with only white men. Also just to put that out there as well. It's also possible to be racially fetishized by other minority groups as well.
I find non-white men can also fetishize white women as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
A lot of women of color complain about that, actually, specifically that sometimes...
Do I empty the clip on Black men here or later?
Gradually bring us up to the climax, Savannah.
Should I do it? I'll do it.
Yeah, like, to be fair, it's not just Black, but a lot of women of color do complain that men of color will fetishize white women for other reasons. Maybe the submissive thing, but also because they feel like having a white woman is like a marker of success.
They want to take a white man's woman, or it's like a status thing.
Yeah.
And this also can be down to colorism as well. In a lot of minority groups, so the lighter you are, the more attractive you are, even within minority groups as well. So it can also be down to a desire for, for example, I don't want my children to be dark-skinned. And yes, I've actually heard people make that argument before. So moving on to the causes of, what causes people to be racially fetishized. And I know that FDS, we bang the anti-porn drum loudly and proudly, but the influence of porn cannot be understated on this particular phenomenon. If you look at porn of that shows a Black woman or an Asian woman, for example, you will not find a scene that isn't heavily steeped in really, really disgusting, like racist tropes. You just won't find one. Like Asian women especially, they are routinely, portrayed as the sexually submissive, young women. They're often made to look a lot younger than they are. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, the Black women, Black women are portrayed, and even Black men as well, are portrayed as extremely hypersexual, as really ghetto, and just quite sexually loose at the same time. So the impact of pornography cannot be understated when it comes to being racially fetishized, to the point where, I've had some of my Black friends who are quite slim, for example, and men basically telling them that they're disappointed that they don't have a big bum and big tits, because that's how most Black women in porn are depicted as having that. It's really, really fucking gross and really and extremely rude. You can't really deny the impact of pornography, and especially in the case of Asian women as well, and the horrific proliferation of sexual tourism, which, by the way, right, if a guy tells you that he goes to Thailand, definitely dig more into that, because it's highly possible that he's gone for sex tourism, which is basically just another form of sexual exploitation and possibly raping women as well. And
children.
That too, and kids specifically. There's a couple of hotbed countries for sexual tourism. And it's actually a little bit different depending on the country. Like, so certain countries are more frequented by Europeans, other countries are more frequented by Americans for sex tourism, and then other countries are more frequented specifically by Black Americans or Black people. So generally, a lot of the sex trafficking tourist hotspots at least used to be places like the Dominican Republic. It's increasingly in Colombia. And the reason we know this is because they're all over YouTube sharing this information.
Yeah, Latin America.
It's really sick and sad. They literally have whole movements.
Reviews of the brothels they go to.
So disgusting.
Yeah, the brothels they go to, but not to mention, like, they call a country if it's been saturated with male sex tourists and the local women have caught on, they call the country burned. Oh, this country's burned now. Meaning all the women they're caught on, these creeps are going there to get, like, free or very cheap sex tourism. So they jack up the prices.
Oh.
Queens, thanks to God. They jack up the prices a lot. And
or start scamming them.
They start scamming the shit out of them. And also what also happens is the local men catch on, and the local men don't like that shit. So some guy, people that turn up missing on vacation and stuff like that. It's not like, especially these more dangerous countries, like it's not like they just let American men go off the resorts and just start picking up women without some conversations, right?
Honestly, I do not feel bad for American men who go missing while sex trafficking.
Yeah, I don't feel bad either. Trust me.
I don't either.
I think that's karma. That's justice.
They get robbed and stuff. I mean, at minimum, they're just getting robbed because obviously if they go there like, oh, I have a pocket full of cash to come like spend it on strippers and sex workers, then
I hope they get robbed. They deserve to get robbed.
Exactly. So just be aware of that. We're not exaggerating. If you go online, I don't suggest you do, but if you go online, there's actually whole YouTube videos, whole YouTube communities. At least those are the public communities. I know there's probably other online communities where they talk about specific places they can go now to pick up where these lames, these really, really stupid, completely dweeby dudes can go and get a lot more bang for their buck when it comes to sex tourism. It's increasingly becoming well known that men do this. So there are actually several countries that are actively fighting back in their legal system because it's become such a widespread phenomenon.
Good. And we should support people who fight back against that. 100%.
But what I think is also even more hilarious is when men expand this willingness to please them into marriage. So they'll go to these places looking for a submissive wife only to find that
mail order bride.
Looking for a mail order bride. And then when they get married, she just comes and picks him clean.
Queen.
That just warms my soul.
We need to liberate these women such that not only are they not being sexually exploited by these men, but they're financially exploiting these fucking scrotes.
I think they're catching on. That's the good news, is that it's not, I mean, they have the internet too, right? So
yeah.
And also they're not dumb. Like they've started to notice the local economy. So they're also figuring out, but I agree. And I think it just needs to be met with the kind of contempt that any other type of trafficking would, right? I feel like for whatever reason, these guys think that this is some kind of love story, and rather than like human trafficking, which it is, like getting a mail order bride is still human trafficking. It's just like romanticized human trafficking.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And especially if you're bringing her over to literally cook and clean for you and have sex with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like men don't see it as human trafficking because they're women. Trying to take a person from an impoverished country to do a job for low or no wage is the same as human trafficking and human slavery. You're not paying them commensurate with what a person would do from that job. You're just trying to marry them and legally bind them to you and then force them to do this work for you as a condition of their residency in the United States, which is human trafficking.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even though there is a marriage, in quotation marks, usually involved somewhere, that's more just a mark of ownership and power and control, especially if the woman's, for example, citizenship is tied, to that marriage. That was just an aside. So the biggest cause, however, is actual racism and stereotypes. So women of color have been traditionally stereotyped and exploited on the basis of their bodies for millennia. When the Europeans invaded Africa, for example, the fetishization of black women's bodies was extremely common. This played out, I think the most prominent example I could think of was of a woman called Sarah Bartman. If you Google her, she was known for having like basically a huge bum. And what they did was they basically exhibited her like an animal in a zoo. all over Europe. And that was actually common, actually, I remember I went to Antwerp, zoo, about 6 or 7 years ago. And at the time, I didn't realize that only 50 years prior, black people, black children are actually exhibited in that same zoo as exhibit A amongst the animals.
Actually, in European museums, exactly that. It's fucked up. She was called Sartia, also known as the Hottentot Venus.
And that is the thing with racial fetishization, is that at its core, it's deeply, deeply rooted in racism.
Or entitlement, right? Racism has many different faces, but one of the biggest is to create reasons so that you feel comfortable exploiting that other group. The point is the dehumanization.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So when we talk about racial fetishization, it's generally, it's almost never racial fetishization for something that would grant that woman agency and power, right? I'm not saying it never happens, but I'm trying to think of a situation where guys would be like, I really like this race of women because they're very independent
and smart and have great sense of humor, or
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen because you have the weird submissive type guys.
But even then, they're basically, if you ask any female dominant what it's like to be with a male sub, they will tell you it's a fucking nightmare. Because even still, they still
they're needy
to top from the bottom, and they're needy, and they like to set the pace. And if they're not being dominated in a particular way, then they're not interested. And even that actually is, predicated on the man almost play acting, being treated like a woman.
Yeah.
So even that is it isn't that he is being treated as inferior based on him being male. He is enjoying the fact that he gets to basically play out female stereotypes of submission to get himself off.
Even if they try to characterize the women as mouthy or independent, the entire fetishization is going to be to dominate and disrespect her. Right? So that's kind of the thing, is that it's so often the degradation is wrapped up in the racial stereotype. They're not racially stereotyping good things against people or things that would cause them to have individually less power.
Yeah.
It's a way to denigrate these women so they feel comfortable sexually exploiting them.
I also find that when especially white men do this, where they will fetishize not so much the actual features of the woman of that particular race. They'll not her physical features, although sometimes they do that as well. What they're fetishizing is specifically the power dynamic. They like feeling more powerful. They like having sex with someone that they see as beneath them, significantly beneath them. And yeah, it's the oppression that they're fetishizing, which is the problem, not so much finding certain physical features more attractive, which is maybe more innocent. But yeah.
Yeah. I actually got that a fair amount in the BDSM community. And it was kind of weird because for all of the BDSM community's faults, one of the times where they did draw the moral line, weirdly enough, was when it came to race. So some people engaged in what's known as, race play, where they enact out basically racist dynamics. And that was actually quite common that I came across that when I was in the scene. And it was very, very disturbing just how comfortable people were with being racist. I
know we've been talking about the men in that situation, but what is the psychology behind women who agree to that stuff? Just bottom barrel self-esteem?
Your ancestors are rolling over in their graves, sis.
I guess though, it's a similar mentality though to the women who agree to be subjugated because they're female, which is basically
true.
The basis of any DS dynamic, isn't it? It's acting out that, and firstly, yeah, it does come from a place of low self-esteem, because thing is with these BDSM dynamics is that you are inadvertently reaffirming in the dynamic how you feel about yourself. So if you have a dom, calling you a bitch, a slut, you're useless, you're worthless, and you enjoy that, that means deep down that you probably actually believe that. Because if you didn't, you would be horrified by it, right? If if someone called you that, you'd be like, what the fuck? But if you actually enjoy it on some level, you believe that to be true. And I just think, just like you can have internalized misogyny, it's possible to have internalized racism, in my view.
That's a good point. In the same way that, yeah, exactly as you said, it's possible to have internalized misogyny. It's possible to have internalized racism.
And especially with, women, we are constantly told that, women are inferior to men in so many different ways, that women, are only as, useful as, men see them. In a similar way, women of color are also told, oh, you're not desirable. You need to change so much about yourself before you can even think about becoming desirable. And all of that is then, brought out and amplified within such a dynamic that I can't understand, but I can see why a woman of color might find it appealing if it's reaffirming all the messages that she's been told growing up.
So this is why I think representation is so important. Representation matters. Positive representation, because if you don't create positive representation for whatever your group is, the dominant group will create it for you, and it's going to be fucked up.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
100%.
White men will frame you in their frame of view, and whatever it is going to be degrading and fucked up and exploitative. So I feel like probably a lot of these women, if that's their issue, they may not have seen a lot of positive representations of their race in popular media, or like the idea that women could be of their race, have their own unique value, etc. So they settled for being a sex toy for presumably some white guy. Yeah. Which is sad. Hanging their self-esteem on like whether white guys find them sexually attractive is just such a failure of an opportunity to build real value for yourself and real self-esteem in the world. And I feel like that's such a failure of liberal feminists in particular, because I feel like a lot of that narrative gets conflated with each other. If you start to think like, oh, kink and BDSM is a way for sexual empowerment for women, then you racialize that. And then a lot of women start thinking, well, this is a way for me to feel sexually empowered and like I have sexual value to people, which I'm like, just take the entire lens off sexual value to men, period.
Yeah.
Can I just say it's weird as fuck to me that liberal feminists will be like, kink and BDSM is amazing. And they'll be super like, oh, Black Lives Matter, super anti-woke, super anti-racist. But then when it comes to race play, they really struggle to have nuanced conversations about that. Like, they'll either be like, well, it's, they're just acting on a fantasy. They're not actually hurting anyone in real life. They'll do the harm, it's not causing any actual harm argument.
Well, their only morality is consent. They'll be like, well, they consented to it and the woman chose this, because they frame it always in consent and choice rather than the actual merit of the actions itself and also the harm on the person or overall on society.
Yeah, and they just seem to completely remove the fact that consent isn't given, like our choices aren't made in a vacuum at all.
But even then, like, there are some kinksters who will draw the line at race play. Like, there are kinksters who will be like, yeah, it's fine to whip women, it's fine to call women bitches, whores, sluts, whatever, call her a cum dumpster, whatever.
Oh, but if you use the N-word in play, too far. Like, you're a bad person.
Exactly, right? So why is the racism not okay to them, but the misogyny is okay to them, right? So that's what I mean about, like, people who are kinky have very conflicting opinions on race play, whether they're for it or against it.
The cognitive dissonance is huge.
I think we got blocked on Twitter by someone who wrote an article that was like, that said, what's that popular kink website you were talking about before?
Oh, FetLife.
Yeah, FetLife has a racism problem. And I was like, you don't motherfucking say, huh? Like, the whole thing was like, oh, this is a shock. There's guys on there that are basically sporting Klan hoods and asking for sexual favors. I'm like, oh, wow, really? Like,
wow, shocking. These same men who, want to fucking sexually degrade and humiliate women, they're also racist.
What a shock. Like,
shocker.
Yeah, it was on BuzzFeed. The name of the article, and maybe we'll roast this on our bonus content. It was called "This Kink Site Has Become a Hotbed of Racism." It was from BuzzFeed News.
Oh, what a surprise! Pretends to be shocked.
I'm not really sure though why people, if we accept that that racism exists in society. I don't know why people are shocked when people say that things like the dating world or sex in general is also racist. So, and it's just as well, I think the general illusion of choice that online dating is given, particularly men, who start thinking that women are some sort of pick and mix assortment that they can just choose from. Like, I've had guys, say, I want to have sex with with a woman of every skin tone or from every continent. And I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah, I've gotten that from guys where they're like, oh, I want to have sex with a redhead, I want to have sex with a brunette, and I want to have sex with a blonde, and an Asian, and a black woman, as though we're all different flavors of ice cream.
Yeah, they just don't see us as people, like, first and foremost, and they just see us as different, flavors that they can try, and with each flavor, in quotation marks, being rooted in some shitty stereotype that they have of that particular group of women. And just even outside the bedroom as well, like, moving away from sex, for a while. I've also had guys say, oh, can you make me jerk chicken? Now, just because I'm black doesn't mean I'm from the Caribbean. I'm not from the Caribbean.
Yeah, I'm like, you're not even Jamaican, right?
No, I'm not.
Like,
I'm not from the Caribbean.
I'm looking at that like,
It's like, no, I'm not from the Caribbean.
They don't even have their ethnicities right.
Because they don't care. That's the thing. They just see a dark-skinned woman and just assume that I will be able or willing or, come from the background that will fulfill whatever fantasy that they have. I'm just like, fuck off.
Jollof rice, maybe?
Did you say jollof rice? Jollof rice?
I can't say it right.
Yeah.
Did I say it wrong?
It's just jollof rice. Jollof rice, yeah.
Oh, jollof.
You're like jollof rice. It's jollof rice.
I love it when Savannah does like the American accent.
Jollof rice. Oh, my bad. Ignorant American.
Is that how Americans say it? Jollof? That's so funny. That's so cute.
That's how I've heard it said. Sorry. Yes, jollof rice.
That's so funny and that's so wrong. Jollof. Jollof. Oh, that was funny.
It could be that I'm just saying it wrong, but that's how I've heard other people pronounce it, so that's how I pronounced it.
Jollof.
Hey Queens, here at the Female Dating Strategy, we're all about taking care of our sexual health and the all-important necessity of getting regularly tested for STDs. 51% of people don't get tested because they don't want to bring up sex or STDs in discussions with their healthcare providers.
Thanks to our sponsor, Let's Get Checked, you're covered. Let's Get Checked is an at-home testing company which is easy and confidential to take an STD test from the comfort of your own home without the awkwardness or unease of visiting a clinic or a healthcare professional.
So here's how Let's Get Checked works. You simply go to their site, order a sexual health testing kit, and it arrives at your door in a small, discreet package. From there, you do a small finger prick and send the sample back to their lab with their prepaid shipping label. And in 2 to 5 days, you'll get your results, and a Let's Get Checked nurse will be available to discuss your results with you if you'd like their feedback.
So navigate to letsgetchecked.com and enter your order and enter the code strategy ! That's letsgetchecked.com
with code strategy ! for 30% off. So thanks so much to our sponsors, Let's Get Checked, and back to the show.
Just to cap off this section, though, in terms of the causes, the point I would like to stress to all women, but especially the women of color, is that essentially we live in a world where the closer you are to whiteness, the more conventionally attractive people are likely to find you. This has been proven in numerous studies, in anecdotal evidence as well. However, just because you are a woman of color, that does not mean that you have to put up with such disrespect and maltreatment. Beauty is, found, within and across all races. And I genuinely believe that this whole almost race to whiteness that women of color are essentially put on is just another way to just create that competition and to create that struggle within the female class as well.
It's weird too, because it's not just women that fall prey to that. It's the men in their group too start to antagonize women for not looking whiter, right? And it's really odd because they also have weird internalized racism where they feel like, and I frequent incel forums way too much, but mostly, honestly, it's pure comedy. It's really funny to laugh at these guys because they're they honestly own themselves better than I could own them. A lot of times, like, it's just like one big circle jerk of self-misery. One of the tropes that they have is that for men who are not white, they call them some variation of a racial stereotype from their country. So they'll call Indian men curry cells or Asian men who are incels rice cells. It's that, yeah.
What?
Right. So most of these guys, they may not be like, not handsome by whatever standards they have of their own communities, but they feel like because specifically white women aren't falling all over them, then they're not of value and they don't value the affection or attention of women in their own group while they call themselves incels at the same time. So it's like a weird racist thing where like, I'm like, if you come from a country such as India, where there's like 1 billion people, clearly people are finding each other attractive and having children and everything's fine.
Yeah.
But these guys are wrapped up again in the racial hierarchy. So they completely disregard and discount the fact that there might be women of their own culture interested in them. It like almost doesn't count for them. They still count themselves as incels because they want white attention.
Yeah, they want white attention, but I want to point out that it's their own fucking fault that they can't even get women of their own race because the curry cells and the rice cells, these are, South Asia and East Asia, China and India are two countries that have had a lot of sex-selective abortions. So
yeah,
a lot of female fetuses were killed before they were able to be born. And so there's just a lot more men than women. And so bit fucking shocker, there's a bunch of dudes nowadays who can't find a wife because there's way more men than women because they don't value female lives. So yeah, again, it's like their own fault, that like it's their own patriarchy's fault that they're incels.
Yeah,
is what I want to say. They'll try to blame women and women are racist or women are shallow or they're this and that or their standards are too high or whatever. But no, it's their own misogyny that's causing them to be incels. So I feel zero compassion for them.
You can find these types of incels online getting really, really mad at interracial couples and literally harassing any woman of their culture that dates out.
Yeah.
So
good for them, queen.
But at the same time, though, these same men that get mad at women of their own race dating out will also like reject the women of their own race. Like, it's almost like if I can't have you or if I don't want you, then nobody else should want you. Like mentality.
Yeah.
It's very fucked. On to the last section of this episode. So, how to tell if a man sees you as a racial fetish. Now, in my dating life, my awareness has become razor sharp, so I can spot them from a mile away. And men, and this is part of the reason why I like online dating, is that you can filter these guys out super, super quick, because a lot of them just have no fucking shame. They'll just say straight up, after saying hello, I've never been with a black woman before. And I was like, yep, and you never will be, block and delete. Because obviously, like, when you're with somebody interracially, it's a great time of discovery. I mean, you find out different things about their culture, about the way they do things, and it can be a really interesting time. But if a man is only talking about the novelty of dating you in terms of your physicality or the way you look, that is a big red flag that you are being racially fetishized.
I would say also things like random code switching that doesn't make any sense. If they suddenly develop like an accent similar to your culture, like a black accent or a weird Latino accent.
Or if they start feeling comfortable using like racial slurs that are exclusive to that group.
Yeah. Unless maybe he's like the white Mike of the group, because everybody has a white Mike. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. White Mike.
What is a white Mike? Yeah, I don't know what that is.
What? For the uninitiated, sorry. White Mike is like, because he's basically like a poor white guy that grew up in a hood that was predominantly inhabited by one racial group. So he's actually kind of grandfathered in, right? He's grandfathered in. That guy, like, he grew up.
I know what you're talking about. I didn't know that at the term. I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah, he grew up around those people. Like, that's not fake. That's all he knows. You can go ahead and give that guy some pussy because he doesn't know any better.
He doesn't know any better. That's just how he is.
Oh, that's funny. I've seen plenty of those men. I just didn't know what it was called. I know what it's called.
White Mike is the guy whose family moved him into a predominantly ethnic neighborhood, and so he picked up all. That's literally his culture. So that guy's fine.
You know, like Bad Baby, like that girl on Dr. Phil, she's from I think Louisiana or something. She everyone was like, "Oh, you're blackfishing." She's like, "No, that's just how I talk." No, I'm not imitating black people. That's just how I am. I'm just white trash.
I did not know that actually had a term. I grew up with a lot of people. I didn't know that had a term. I grew up with a lot of people. It was like that. But yeah, that's funny. That's funny.
That guy's genuine. So I'm just saying. What we're talking about is something different than that guy.
Yeah.
Shout out to White Mike. Sorry, I'm kidding. I know. I think that's so funny.
What? I'm just imagining him that being his actual nickname, like White Mike. Like,
sometimes it is, to be honest.
In the ghetto, yeah.
Like, hey, my boy White Mike.
Sometimes it's literally White Mike.
But back to the point about the sexual comments as well. I just find that statement super weird as well, because from a sexual standpoint, a woman's race has really got nothing to do with how she is sexually. And again, this goes back to, the racist porn tropes that are trotted out, that certain women of a particular race, like, perform sexually in a different way. And it's just false. And it's very degrading as well, to someone coming at you thinking that you're gonna be like twerking on their dick just because you're black and they've seen it in porn. Like, super, super degrading. No, literally, like, that's literally what guys have said to me. And I'm just sitting there slightly, just like, I mean, firstly, it's a sign they're porn sick, but it's disgusting, basically. So yeah, I mean, that's probably my number one tell, is that these like race chasers, as I call them, they often give themselves away very, very quickly because they're usually porn sick as well. Another thing that's happened to me as well is, like, guys have said I look like these black porn stars when we have, like, nothing physically in common.
They think all black people look the same?
Honestly, like, it's so, like, yeah. On to probably the biggest flag is if he says he only dates women of a particular race, and if he is especially disparaging to women of his own race. So, for example, if a white man says, and this is quite common as well, like, American women are they're into all this, like, for example, feminist bullshit. I'm gonna go over to Thailand and get a wife there. And men have actually said this unashamedly. Then, no. Or they'll just, find an Asian woman to date because they assume that they're all submissive and passive and will just, roll over for them. I also think that racialized minorities can also fetishize, for example, racialized majorities. We've spoken about the impact of colorism previously in the episode, and that is a huge thing. It isn't uncommon, for men within a racialized minority community to seek out, essentially white women to, whether that be for their own personal status or if they just essentially harbor a dislike for darker skinned women. And as a result of that, we see this a lot in rap music. They will end up disparaging, women of their own race as well. That's a slightly different form of the fetishization because it's directed towards the majority group, which is the majority in this case is white women. But it's still a form of a racial fetish. Especially if you go to the extent of degrading women of your own race, you know, some of these women, like who you're probably darker than.
I want to say straight up, if I find out a guy is colorist, I'm extra mean to him just to teach him a lesson that white women shouldn't be trusted. I just want him to know.
It's what they deserve.
It's what they deserve. On the side of female solidarity. Because here's the thing. Okay, I'm white, right? But guys, I've dated guys who are white and also guys outside of my race. I live in a very multicultural city. There's people from all different backgrounds. But it's embarrassing how many men will date me who are not white, and they'll say something really shitty about women of their own race, and the women of my race, they're like, I don't even want to say it out loud because it's like,
yeah, maybe don't.
I feel uncomfortable saying that out loud. But anyways, I'll leave that up to your imagination. But they'll say degrading things about the women of their own race, and they say it in a way like it's supposed to be a compliment to me. And in my head, I take that as moral license for I get to do whatever the fuck I want to him. I'm like, I will destroy you. I will drain your bank account. I don't have to treat you like a person anymore. Just as an act of female solidarity, okay? And I strongly encourage white women out there, if a guy is degrading to women of his own race, that means that you get to be mean to him. I don't make the rules.
Be worse. Be worse than what he's describing.
Like, be worse than what he's... Exactly. If he's saying, oh, women of my own race are demanding, be more demanding. If he's saying, oh, women of my own race, they're so materialistic, be more materialistic.
The sad part is these guys are so racist internally that they'll take it from a woman who's not of their same race. That's the fucked up part.
Yeah.
That's and a lot of women talk about that. It's like they'll get a woman of a certain ethnicity and suddenly all those behaviors are cute, or they'll tolerate it from women who are not of their same race. And shows you it's just a bunch of like internalized racism and hypocrisy and not actually about the women themselves. Yeah,
I want to teach him a lesson that white women are not better. We're actually a fucking nightmare sometimes. I just want him to know that.
Did you tell the story here about your stepdad's Asian bride that like basically...
Oh, yeah. Like, okay, so my dad, he has a second wife. She's from an Asian country. He thought she would be submissive. She's not. She terrorizes him emotionally and psychologically. She has him completely wrapped around her finger. I kind of hate her because she's my stepmom, and I don't like how... I kind of hate how she's probably draining my dad's bank account, which is going to impact my inheritance, so that does bother me a little bit, not going to lie. That being said, I too would one day like to own a man the way that she does. Like, I want to know her tricks, her strategies. I want to learn from her. I want to be like her. I don't want to compete with her over my dad's attention. But I too hope to ascend to the levels of queendom, ruthless queendom as she does. But yeah, so yeah, my dad expected her to be like submissive, and also she's quite a bit younger than him. And he didn't get that at all. He got a woman who he doesn't even seem to realize or acknowledge how dependent he is on her and how much she rules the roost. But no, good for her, like queen.
Make his pockets hurt. If
a guy is racist, make his pockets bleed. That's my political platform. Scam men who are racist, they deserve it. It is, you have the moral license to do that.
Scam racist 2024.
Yeah.
And again, it's just another flavor of misogyny, and it honestly makes me so. It honestly makes me quite sad that so many women, or they date guys who are very, very disparaging of women, like racially, because ultimately it comes down to a lack of respect and misogyny, right? If he can do that to another woman, he can and will do that to you. And especially these these rappers and their baby mamas always find out the hard way that, you know, these rappers who constantly rap about, oh, I only do white chicks, or, you know.
Me and my cohort of crazy white bitches.
Yeah, exactly. For example.
me and my clan of crazy white bitches are gonna come after you!
They're gonna pull up. Lilith and her crew's about to pull up.
I will ruin their lives.
Lilith and her crew's on every block.
No, unironically, this is how we will defeat colorism, is by the women at the top of the hierarchy just being so costly that the men just decide they're not worth it. That there's no benefit.
But I'm telling you, they're so brainwashed that they'll justify it. That's why I've seen this shit go down. Like, I hate to say it, but again, YouTube and like World Star Hip Hop and all these things. There's so many videos of men who date outside their race, and these women will call them all types of racial slurs and degrading things to their face, and they're just sitting there and taking that shit. So I feel like I'm fine with you doing it. Trust me, I'm fine. I don't know if it'll be enough to break them. Such is the spell of
That just means we need to up the ante. That just means
snatch souls, purses, wallets, snatch the block.
break his ego, reach down into his deepest insecurities, and then twist the dagger in his heart.
I'm telling you, get 401ks in your name and divorce rape the shit out of all of us. Do it for the culture.
I will do it for my sisters. Solidarity.
Evil cackle. Like get married and then fuck someone white in their house.
Marry him and then cheat on him with the white guy. And then empty his bank account.
It's what they deserve.
That's justice, okay? That's just equity. Sorry.
Bogus racial. Our list of really bogus racialized things to do.
Combat racism with even more racism.
It ain't safe in these streets.
Not with Lilith out here prowling the streets.
We want you to know. We want all these like racial fetishizers to know it ain't safe out here. It ain't safe in these streets no more. Lilith and her crew's gonna pull up at any time.
Okay. I'm really crying.
This is supposed to be a serious conversation about. It's hard to be serious because it's so ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous because men act like this.
They need to be punished, honestly. There needs to be consequences for their behavior, as we've said before.
It's true. Like, and other women shouldn't entertain that. If you come across a guy who is very, very disparaging of women towards his own race, like, firstly, he's outing himself as a misogynist because, you know, that is, you know, the underlying factor. But secondly, he also has no respect for you as well. Like, he's trying to create that sense of competition and that sense of, you know, you're better than another woman, hence why I'm with you. But really, all you've won is the booby prize because he ain't shit.
Exactly. If he's saying that, it means he's the consolation prize, okay? He's not relationship material at that point.
And it's quite sad to see so many women buy into that. They will get with these, you know, misogynists and, you know, racist or internally racist men, and then they'll start doing the shocked Pikachu face when he starts being a piece of shit to them as well. And it's like, they're not gonna, if you're watching a guy unload his, you know, misogyny, which is essentially, you know, what this is a different form of onto another woman, rest assured he's got plenty left. He's got plenty of servings left for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's been a lot of women who've had egg on their face when it came
Danny
to
Lee is one, that yellow bone.
Yeah, since Santana, where like they've dated men, they've dated black men, and I think they actually made a lot of very explicit colorist statements, and also said that like, oh, black guys treat them better because they're light skinned, or black guys treat them better because they're Latino. And then these guys treated them like shit and ended up like publicly embarrassing them. And so sometimes when women, like, they can internalize that racial fetishization and put themselves on a pedestal, and then it makes them very blind to all the ways these guys are playing them, because they feel like, oh, he might have did that to the other type of woman but she's not me, and I'm this and I'm that. And it's usually some kind of weird, unjust, racialized weird, unjust pride in the racial fetishization of these like low rent dudes. And then these low rent dudes act like low rent guys, like they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right. Like they've advertised they are. And so a lot of these women end up with egg on their face and end up looking real stupid because now they're like the fifth baby mama to some like struggling rapper. And they thought they were special because they were basically not black. Right.
Yeah. No, that's my message for white women out there. Like, you are not special. These guys might put you on a pedestal, but understand that, like, it's not... If the guy is shitty to begin with, there's no value in being put on a pedestal by somebody like that.
Yeah, sure.
If you do interact with those kinds of guys, you have to have a ruthless pragmatist mindset. Don't think that this is true romance, anything like that. Like, get in, get your bag, and get out, and then humiliate him so that you come out on top. Or don't or just shut it down, or just don't interact with them at all. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just like weird like that.
Yeah,
but...
don't entertain it. Yeah,
even Khloe Kardashian, who we actually, we feel sort of bad for here because obviously Tristan Thompson. I don't know. Well, maybe we don't.
No, I don't feel bad for her either.
All right, I was trying to be diplomatic, but no, she's another example of like, okay, she got with a guy whose girlfriend was pregnant at the time they were hooking up. Right. And then expected to be treated better, I think, because she was a Kardashian. He does nothing but embarrass her and cheat on her and have outside kids. So
yeah, I saw this tweet. I can't remember the person who posted it, but they had a really great tweet that was like, oh, the Kardashians are getting the baby mama treatment in their own house.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. It's true.
And like she's gone out of her way to be like, oh, I only date black guys and I only have this. And there's nothing, I guess, wrong with having... This is like where the whole preference versus fetishization thing gets a little weird. Because I'm not saying you can't like date what you like, but at the same time, it comes across like she thought she had more power there than she did.
If you look at the Kardashians, though, they've basically made their money off emulating having traditionally black,
having curvy bodies, getting BBLs.
Of like having like traditionally black or racially ambiguous features, because they're all pale as hell, like naturally, but thanks to tan and filters and stuff, they've now
lip fillers and BBLs and
they can now pass as being racially ambiguous. It was funny actually on the topic of Khloe Kardashian was when Tristan Thompson like released that bullshit statement when he admitted to fathering another child, and he was like, I take full responsibility for my actions. I was like, who else do you expect to take responsibility for your actions? Who else?
It's like, you don't have a choice now. The DNA test came back. The paternity test came back positive, so he doesn't have a choice but to take responsibility now because he's legally required to. So
I was like, and also, who else do you expect to carry responsibility for you? Like,
yeah,
right.
So I mean, yeah. It's, I think some class, solidarity is needed, but that also involves people, especially white women, accepting that race plays a huge role in attraction and how women are treated, because a lot of white women are, quite frankly, they're still in denial because it doesn't affect them, or they don't think that race, even though they acknowledge it's an issue in society, they don't recognize how that impacts on dating. Well, they're not willing to recognize that impacts on dating. And you can have, to the point where you can have a black woman and a white woman who are doing exactly the same thing or wearing the same thing. The white woman is deemed as immensely attractive, whereas the black woman is, you know, ghetto, trashy, and disgusting.
But I guess we kind of already covered that when we talk about men's internalized racism, is that, yes, you can have the same behaviors exhibited by two different women and it's perceived very differently by the same man because of him accepting certain racial stereotypes is true.
Yeah.
Or validating certain racial things. So it is kind of messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is our brief introduction into the topic of racial fetishization. I can't even say it properly, guys, in dating. I hope this sparks a bigger discussion because obviously I'm only speaking from the perspective of a black woman. It will be good to revisit this topic again, and have, you know, women from different ethnic minorities and backgrounds sharing their experience. But in the meantime, feel free to comment your own experiences. And I'd really, really like to reiterate that just because you may not fit the conventional standards of beauty due to the color of your skin, that does not mean that you're not beautiful. It does sound really cheesy, but it's absolutely true. Like, beauty can be found within and across all races. Mm-hmm. And say no to racist fetishizers and men. Just say no to them, or just make their lives hell, just like Lilith will.
Yeah, either say no or destroy their lives. Those are the only two options.
Go scorched earth and make his pockets hurt.
Si se puede.
Make him suffer or ignore him completely. Option A, option B. You know, good cop, bad cop. You know, they should be grateful, actually, if I ignore them, okay? That's actually the more merciful option.
That's our show. Check out our Twitter at fem.strat and our Instagram at _ the female dating strategy. And check out our website, thefemaledatingsstrategy.com. And if you want to hear weekly bonus content, go to our Patreon, patreon.com / the female dating strategy. Thanks for listening, queens. And for all you racial fetishizers out there, Lilith's pulling up with the clip. Blah, blah. Die mad.
See you next week, guys.